10 slides to kind of set up the demo, and then I'm going to jump into the demo. And then after that, it's open questions for you guys. Okay. Project Server is a very powerful tool, as you've probably been, or know already, or been learning this week. How many of you practice Scrum or Scrum practitioners? Okay, there's a few. And how many of you use a certain tool to practice Scrum? What are the main tools we use?
TFS.
We're using version 1.
Version 1?
TFS.
TFS, good. That's a good point on TFS. We built this little application, this configuration, based on not really needing TFS or having some other ALM system that doesn't necessarily integrate with the Project Server. This actually works pretty well with the TFS connector as well, Project Server TFS connector. The configuration is slightly different. So today I did not include the TFS part of this into the tool, but you will be seeing a little bit about how we just use Project Server. So if you guys aren't familiar, how many are not familiar with Scrum? Anybody? Okay, so I don't need to go too much into this. Some of the main lessons of this slide is it's an iterative approach, right? And there's certain events that happen during the Scrum process, and there's certain roles. And there's roles of the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, and the Scrum Practitioners, which is really the team. Benefits of Scrum is that you get value. Well, first of all, you involve the Product Owner quite closely. So you get a pretty close rendition of what the product owner really wanted when you come out the other end. The other advantage is that you get higher value features and items in your product sooner than you do in a kind of a waterfall approach. Well, let's get into the slides here. So those are two of the benefits of Scrum. So here's some things about lessons that I've learned practicing Scrum now for about 5 years. So what works well? So you have a more involved product owner. That's a key feature of Scrum. And some of the lessons I take away from that is I've worked with clients and teams that the culture is very much used to having the product owner involved, maybe at the first in the requirements part of the project, but then the team kind of disappears and the product owner is relieved of duty for a little bit. In Scrum, that doesn't happen. It's very important that that product owner stays with the team and works closely with the team throughout the entire development process. That usually results in a higher customer satisfaction if that product owner is kind of like a customer if you treat it like that. The team is very tight. I'm going to show you a picture here in a little bit of a team practicing Scrum. They're all sitting at the same table. It's a shared space, and I saw that when the team was practicing Scrum in that manner, they were very tightly coordinated. Things like, I got to reboot the server. Anybody care? And it just works really well. The process provides the development of most value sooner. And allows flexibility to cut lower value features towards the end of the project or the end of the development part of the project. What doesn't work well in Scrum is that if the culture is inflexible, their standard definition of a successful project is on time, on budget, and on target as far as scope. If you have that really rigid definition of a successful project, Scrum's probably not going to be successful for you. So teaching the culture how to be a little bit more flexible in that manner tends to expand the success of Scrum inside the organization. When the team is not co-located, so we had several teams that were some offshore, some here onshore. It wasn't as optimal. I mean, it wasn't a bad thing, but it wasn't as optimal. The team wasn't as coordinated as if it was sitting at the right table, at the same table. So it was a little bit, we lost a lot in translation doing the sprint stand-ups every morning on the phone. You really didn't see the person talking, and it was a little bit, it wasn't optimal. So obviously I'm giving you lessons that I've learned over the time, and this isn't really like, theoretical material here. Another thing that I noticed is that Scrum requires really a self-driven team. If you have a team that sits there and waits, or a team member that sits there and waits to be told to do something, and will stop work and just not let anybody know that they've stopped because they have nothing else to do, these kinds of people generally don't work well in Scrum teams. And so part of our practice in coaching these people is trying to coach people to be self-driven, right? So to take those cards or those user stories off the wall as your next piece of work, and work on it on your own. If you have any questions, work with the product owner and such. So if it works better if you have a self-driven people on your team. Another feature of Scrum, which many organizations tend to lose, is that the team actually tracks itself and determines what needs to be done. So empowering the team to deliver the features in the way that they feel comfortable with or think is the best way to do it. Empowering that team is very important, and that's a little bit of a culture change in many organizations as well, because obviously project managers, as we all have or I am, tend to like to drive, be task driven. I need to know when you're going to be done and what % complete and all that. That doesn't work in Scrum. Scrum is empowering the team to do the work and get their commitment in the product. So obviously, if you don't have a self-driven team, that's not going to work well, right? So that's a big feature of Scrum, is the team tracks itself, and that's part of how we got to this particular configuration in Project Server. Is the team, along with doing their regular development, which they were being paid to do, helped develop this configuration in the tool to make their lives easier. And we were all for that when we did this. Okay, so lesson and cadence. So obviously we got a couple of wheels there. They represent cycles, right? And that cycle is actually very easily interrupted. This is one of the things that we found. If the product owner and the team don't regularly groom that backlog, or if the user stories don't have acceptance criteria or a demo script on them, then the team kind of falters and waits for the product owner to come down and do the work they're supposed to be doing. So what the team decided, again, it's a self-driven team, they figured out they had a problem. Obviously they came to the end of a sprint and then they waited for a week or two while the product owner organized the rest of the stories and the features that they wanted. And that's, delayed the team. They were stuck for a couple of weeks. So the solution was to pre-schedule all the Scrum ceremonies, and they threw one more Scrum ceremony that's not necessarily in the Scrum book, and that is a backlog grooming event. These guys were doing 30-day sprints, backlog grooming event on week 3, about Thursday or Friday of week 3. And the reason they did that is because they wanted to see in week 4 exactly how many of these features they were going to be able to actually put out the door. And they needed the ability to throw the ones that can't make this release or this particular end of sprint. They wanted to throw that off into the next sprint, and they wanted to make sure they clean so they can end on a solid note and then be able to start the next sprint. So the product owner already had a head start in figuring out what was going to kind of be delivered, because things were getting thrown over the fence in week 3. Not that that's a good practice, but obviously if you don't pay attention to your estimates during sprint planning and know what your velocity is for your team, you're going to run short. And if the estimates aren't accurate, which sometimes happen, sometimes there's not enough clarity in the user stories to get accurate estimates. So when you actually talk about it with the product owner, you find out, well, it's not exactly X that they wanted Y, and that'll cost extra time. So it was very important for them to schedule these ceremonies and make them firm. And so one of the things they configured into the tool was this particular schedule. I'll show you some of that. All right, so these are the actual ceremonies. Notice that we had the backlog grooming event inserted. That is an event that the team did. It was done in week 3 again on a Thursday or Friday or even a Wednesday sometimes. But it was important that we had a cadence. And so the team continued on 30-day sprints. Another lesson learned, we tried playing with 2-week sprints, 45-day sprints, 30-day sprints. That drove the team nuts. They didn't know what day they were supposed to do the planning meeting or the backlog review, or they didn't, so stabilizing the sprint cycle, 30 days, always, on week 3 we're doing this, on week 1 we're doing this. It made it a pattern for the team to help follow and become very productive. So it's very important on cadence that you're practicing a certain cadence and you stick to it. Try, you might want to play around with some different cadences, but once you find your balance, the cadence is very important. Okay, so I have the Lord Scrum Master over there, and Scrum. So the point of this whole thing is I learned. So I started with PMI and waterfall, developing my own IT development methodologies, as many of us have. This was years and years ago. And then I found Scrum, and I thought that was all the rage and the best thing in the world, and I became religious and had my little robe on and all that. After a while, I started to realize that there isn't a utopia of methodologies. There isn't a perfect one. It seemed to me that it was, on certain kinds of projects, Scrum worked well. On certain kinds of projects, Waterfall worked well. On other kinds of projects, different forms of Waterfall worked well. So my point here, and hopefully I can convey to you that it's in, I've walked into shops where, they're just religious about Scrum, and that's all they eat, breathe, and sleep, but they've limited themselves in doing other kinds of projects, things that are very consistent, like infrastructure, rollouts and stuff. And it seemed to me that if I could actually take Scrum and use it as a tool in my tool belt, along with Waterfall and all the other methodologies that I have, when I come up to a project and decide, there's a high degree of uncertainty, the product owner really doesn't know what they want, the team doesn't know if they can deliver that kind of technology, I'll pull out Scrum for that one, because Scrum is a learning process. Along with the development process, the product owner learns what's possible, the team learns what's possible. So that cycle is kind of like a learning process. So when there's high degrees of uncertainty, Scrum's a great tool. When I'm building track homes or any kind of projects where I'm just a repetitive kind of project, Scrum doesn't necessarily offer any advantages. In fact, I found that the quality of the project on repetitive kinds of projects or routine projects, it worked better if we had a solid waterfall approach, because it was very well understood what the task took. In construction, we know how long it takes for concrete to dry. You don't have to kind of learn about that. So the right tool for the job. And so here's a couple of pieces. We have a Mr. Project Manager. And the reason I threw the Lord Scrum Master there is because I lost my religion. I lost that Scrum religion because I realized that it's a tool. You don't have to be a zealot about it. It's a tool, and it's an important tool, a valuable tool, but not the only tool. And if you consider it like that, I think you're going to be more successful. All right, so what does a Scrum team look like? Well, as I mentioned, this team that I work with, these are very solid developers. This is a very, very, very large organization, and these guys all came from Cubeland. They all worked in their cubes. The organization had a major restructuring in IT, and they decided that part of that restructuring they were going to launch Agile. And this was the pilot team. This was the first team that got sent to Agile for Scrum training. And again, these are all-star developers right here, these guys right here. So there's a couple of things that I'd like for you to see, and that is way in the background over there, you see a card wall. And one of the first things the team was doing before Project Server was installed was managing all the user stories on this card wall. Notice that there's stripes, there's buckets, and the cards would progress across this card wall, and they were using these index cards. That was really good. In fact, the teams following this team all picked up this card wall approach to managing Scrum. That was good as long as you were in the same room with that card wall. The offshore people, not so much, right? Management, what office is that card wall in? They couldn't find out where their projects were. And some people actually liked that. So once we installed Project Server, what we did is we developed a solution that looked like the card wall for these guys, and we put it up on this big screen at the end of the table. So now the team, actually, you're going to see that they're actually paying attention to their burn down. They have their burn down chart up there. They also have their card wall up there that they can actually manage. And so the team was basically, you know, the status of the project was live, full-time, all there. Honestly, it was up there. It was not a white screen. I don't know why the picture showed it all white. Probably a resolution issue. But there's definitely a card wall, and it's burned down right in that. I'm sorry? No. This was deprecated. This was actually sunsetted, but we just left it there because, I don't know. In fact, we ended up taking it down, turned it around. These boards were, on one side they were whiteboard, and the other side they were like a pin board. So we ended up turning it all around because there wasn't enough whiteboard space. There's never enough whiteboard space for developers. So that's what a team looks like, right? And so if you guys are headed in this direction this team was very tightly coordinated. They were definitely self-driven. These were all-star developers, okay? Some of the most impressive people I've ever met over my years. It was important for these guys to have quiet space. So I might have talked to you some outside. Obviously, we're going to strike up conversations about why is that thing happening, where's that bug, you know, or how do I do the solution, and then the rest of the people don't want to hear about that, right? So there's a lot of noise going on. So everybody had the ability to walk away into this quiet area, which is actually behind them, and into cubes, work on their own. There was actually additional places around the building that they could go to and get into more private areas. But certainly your position was here, and one of the things we encouraged was not sitting in the same seat twice. Everybody had to sit next to somebody different and always rotating. It was just a team dynamic thing, the organization actually had coaches come in, and I was one of the coaches, to coach these teams and you know, figure out what their obstacles were and such. And the coaching, mentoring coaching approach was really good for these guys. These guys were awesome, man. They would kick out basically almost a release a sprint. And they wanted the product so fast, they didn't do 2 or 3 sprints before release. They would just, it was potentially shippable product, right? That's a Scrum rule. And certainly the product owner wanted it and wanted it now. So every month they got new features, which was great for the product owner. The team felt successful. The people using the product weren't so happy because every month it changed, and then they had to relearn how, you know, what was going on. So that was a lesson learned. You know, always constantly changing software. The user base kind of doesn't appreciate it so much, unless it's a feature they really want. All right, can I practice Scrum with Project Server? Absolutely. Do you need Team Foundation Server? It's nice to have. You can use it, but you don't have to have it. Project Server can be configured to handle different methodologies, including Scrum, and that's part of my, you know, use the right tool for the job, right? So if I had a tool that only tracks Agile and Scrum projects, and then I have a project server that handles all my other kinds of projects, well, where's my consolidated reporting? I'm going to have to build integration and reporting and single tool, have it all in one place. Single source of truth, good place. And if it handles all the different methodologies, and as you've probably been learning this week, it does lifecycle management. So your particular methodologies can be handled. There's different project types in Project Server, so you can handle Scrum projects, you can handle infrastructure projects, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, you can. All right, and how can you do it? Well, it's all about structure, okay? And we play with a bunch of different structures. In fact, one of the first projects this team worked on was, this company had a very rigorous waterfall approach, very rigorous. And the first half of the project was all about selecting the vendor and the budgets and so forth. That was all done in waterfall. When the team came to actually develop and execute the development part of the software, they continued on with the same plan. The first half of the plan was all waterfall. The second half was all Scrum. And you'll see some of that. What I'm going to be showing you today is, after that approach, right, we started a new project, strictly Scrum. We got rid of the governance part, and we started doing it this way. So what we did is we set up a master project that was actually the product. So every product had a master project. And that was a way to consolidate reporting all for that particular product, and not necessarily having one project for the entire product. And you'll see that in the case that I'm going to demo for you today, we had this master project, and then we had a sub-project that actually was an infrastructure project. The demo I'm giving you is actually a deployment of Project Server. The product is Project Server. So the first thing to do is stand up the servers, right? Build the environments. And so they wanted the execution of that to be handled by the infrastructure team, and they like waterfall. Okay, so they were able to do a waterfall approach, just to stand up the hardware. And then there was a development team that got engaged in another project to build this Scrum solution or enhance this Scrum solution. So there was another project. And you can do many, many, many different projects of different kinds, all in the same product. And certainly by using the master and sub-project paradigm here, you can roll it all up in reporting. Okay? So it's not the only approach, so please don't take away that. There are many different structures that you can build in the tool, and you'll find one that you really like. Okay? And so I'm going to show you one. And so there's our demo. And I'm going to jump out here to the demo. And I apologize, there's not a lot of room for my mouse, and I'm not much of a pad guy. Okay, so we have a PWA. You guys are probably familiar. Are you guys familiar with Project Server? Don't need to go deep. Okay. So I just have a nice little logo, and I have a couple of team sites up here. What I wanted to show you is in the project center, really the project side of the house, not necessarily the team side of the house here. And we have the Project Server program, right? I'm going to show the sub-projects to it. And we have the infrastructure project, which was release 1.0, and release 1.1 was to add the Scrum solution to it. Obviously, you can put this to bed for a while, come back, the next quarter, the next year, whenever you have budget, throw another project up underneath there, continue to expand the work on that particular product. You don't necessarily have to go back to back to back to back. It can be put to bed for a while. All right, so we have the actual project, and let me get into the Scrum part of this, since I want to show you the waterfall part of this. And so what we have here is the actual project. Notice how the structure of the plan is actually working. We have a sprint 0 here. We have a backlog area here. We have the sprint 1 here. We have the sprint 2 here. So they've already completed a couple of sprints. And it's just basically the structure in the plan. It's all about structure. Okay, so the structure of the master, the sub-project, how your project is put together, you can certainly track it. All right, so that's enough on the project side. Obviously, you can use lifecycle management to make this project progress through your stages and such. And in this case, this organization was doing the programs. They were doing the lifecycle on the program, but not necessarily on the individual projects that are underneath it. So that was the finance model, was to finance or fund the program, and then the projects doled out from that. All right, so I'm going to come back here to the project site, and this is where it starts getting good. So this is the screen that the team had. Oh man, the resolution is not fitting on this thing. All right, it's a little squeezed because of the camera, but this is the task, the card wall. I didn't expect that. And change my resolution. That's the size it goes. Okay. Let's get back to that. All right. So this is actually a card wall. It starts off with what's in next. It goes to progress. It goes to QA. Goes to review by the product owner, and then it goes to completed. You might have a better rendition of this, but this is the team site. You notice that today's events in the team cadence. The team cadence is all done in the calendar. When you actually open up the calendar, you see that the team cadence has the daily scrums events, it has the product review events, it has the backlog grooming event, and this was done through a macro, or through a feature in the tool that you can just say you're going to start the sprint on this date, end the sprint on this date, and it'll put up all the events for you in this calendar. Okay, so that's the cadence. Down here we have upcoming feature requests. These are things that are in queue or in the backlog, ready to be coming up. It's kind of like visible. We see that the team has provided some estimates, but not for all of these particular user stories. We see a burn down, and this actually does go all the way. I don't know why this is resolving halfway there. but it does go all the way. And notice that you can tell that things are burning down real fast, and then things started burning up, and then there was a big change in scope there. The product owner decided that the feature needed to be a little different than they originally thought. And then obviously the team resolved that with the owner and worked on it a little bit, and then decided, hey, you know what, we're going to throw a bunch of this stuff over the fence because this is expansion in scope and we can't finish this off. So they threw stuff over the fence, which burned down the product, or the sprint time remaining down underneath the line, which was really good, and they got back on track and they finished on time. Scrum ends up finishing on time a lot, right? You can throw features over the fence, you're cutting scope just to finish on time. Finishing on time is pretty important based on the lesson on the cadence, right? Finishing on time. So, but the scope is what's flexible inside of Scrum. Okay, so some of the things that the team was doing is the card wall in order to update. You know, obviously we tried the task updates, and that was okay. They had the publishing event, so the Scrum Master had to open the project plan and publish every night, and it was a little bit painful. So what they did is they developed this card wall, and they made it so they could edit the card wall, update the bucket that they're in, update the time remaining, the percent complete, and I'm not going to say that, but that's basically to edit the task and move it and progress it along. This particular feature actually publishes the plan automatically, so it saves the task update, publishes the plan automatically. Remember, there's not a project manager that's in charge of the project anymore. This is Scrum. So we took that approval process out for this particular feature. We did the rest of the project types have the approval processes in place. All right, so let's take a look at how we're doing on time. All right, so I want to finish about 5 to 10 minutes early and give you guys a chance for questions. So I'm going to try to move it along here. Okay, so we want to talk about how does the life of a project or a life of a feature, I'm sorry, of a user story. So what we did here is we created a feature. I have one preset, so you don't have to be painfully looking at my typing. And so we created this Word template, and notice some of the pieces that we're trying to capture, right? We need a demonstration script. We need acceptance criteria. The architects always put their 2 cents in, so the delivery approach, how we're supposed to deliver it. And then there's a place for the card rank for the owner to rank the card, and also the team estimate, right? And these are all fields. They're fields that are taken from the SharePoint site. So once you type them in here, they'll be exposed inside of the SharePoint. I'll show you what I'm talking about there. So I have this this particular user story. I'm going to come up to the I'm sorry, wrong place. I'm going to come up to the server program, and this is a server program. This is a product burn down chart. Again, it's being crunched, but it tells us how much time is it being burned through all the features, right? High priority items, what priorities is it? A nice little chart, and I apologize. Let me see if I can pull this up out of the report from here. I might be able to show you this entire report. The report is not only a web part, but it's also a report. So I can go into the product backlog, choose a project server, and hopefully you can see this whole report. You'll see the product work by work priority. These are the features that are happening. This is by time and such. So this is a typical report. It's in that web part, but it's being squeezed by the resolution. All right, so this is the product site, and the product site, you know, this is kind of like the planning, the high-level planning of what the product should be doing. High-level planners, not necessarily the team developers, are in here, and people are coming in and adding their feature requests in here. So I'm going to add that feature request to the library. Notice that all the stuff that I typed inside of that document is actually exposed now in SharePoint list because of that field, okay? So now you can actually see them in the columns, right? So we have card wall enhancement, there it is right there, okay? So that's it. And so we have some user stories here. So what we did, so we have this high-level site, and we need to actually do some release planning, right? We have to say, okay, what release is this particular feature scheduled? Hopefully to be delivered in what version. And so this is what this team's doing, right? So we have these sites and these different sub-projects, and each one represents a release. And I want this particular enhancement to actually go in release 1.1, the current release. I'm going to go ahead and promote this to that release. And there's a little workflow that does that, sent to release 1.0. And that'll just copy that document down. And it uses the send to function. So it actually makes a copy of the document, a linked copy to the project site or the release site. And whenever you update it, it prompts the person updating that, hey, you have another copy over there. Do you want to overwrite that existing copy? So this is a SharePoint feature that workflow just enacted. And so now when I go down to let's see here. Let's get on the project here. On here, get into the feature request library local to the release. I see my card wall enhancement right there. Okay. So what I just did is a manager in the organization said they needed this card wall enhancement feature. They went to the product site, they put in the enhancement, it was obviously evaluated, et cetera, which you didn't see. It happened real fast in this organization. And then they said, yeah, you know what, we're going to put this in the release 1.0. And they go ahead and promote it to the first release. Okay, this is where we're going to put it in, and this is where the team actually works on it. Okay, so at this point, this card has not necessarily been evaluated by the product owner. Maybe they know from the high-level planning they were involved, but now the product owner is working with the team, and we need to go ahead and do some sprint planning. I want to go ahead and set up a new sprint. And so for sprint planning, we got a view called sprint planning, and this is where the team can go ahead and put in their estimates, and they've pre-populated some of the estimates. I got a couple to do there. But obviously the product owner has come in and said this is a must or a should, and another thing that we found as far as must, should, could, and won't, that was our initial take on prioritizing these cards. When you have, everybody's a must. Nobody ever puts shoulds or won'ts in there, okay? So, okay, now everybody's a must. How do you prioritize that? So we put another column in to give it a card rank. So amongst all the musts, now we have a numeric value that we can then say, sort by this, and now I have high priority items versus lower priority musts. So that's in here. We got a couple of high priorities on here. And I'm going to go ahead and put some time on there arbitrarily. So this is in hours, right? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and promote it to the plan. So now, in order to promote it to the plan, what the team did is actually built a feature that I'm not allowed to use because they paid for it. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I built my own little feature that is to create a sprint. So this is the Scrum Toolkit that we have. It's a little macro that builds our sprint structure for us. I believe we had 5 tasks in there. And so this is just a little macro that builds the kind of structure that we like. Okay, so there's a sprint structure. We have a milestone at the beginning and at the end. We have some ceremonies scheduled. And we have some blank user stories that I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste in here. Okay. So now we have the plan. It's in sprint 3, and we're ready to go. So what the next thing that happens is, in order to get a good burn down, what we want to do is we want to baseline at this point. So we have the estimates in there. We want to go ahead and baseline. So we're going to baseline this section of the plan. All right, so now we have a baseline in here, and now the burn down can start. It says, okay, on day 1 we had X amount of hours. In fact, I can show you that. It's off to the right here. Didn't I have that time in there? I thought time would have been pasted in there. At least it did every time I practiced. All right, so we have time. We have, in sprint 3, we have 37 hours to execute this. Obviously, usually this team's velocity was approximately 200 hours in their sprints. So we have some time in there, and we're going to go ahead and kick it off. I probably should set the baseline now. So now it's time to kick it off, and then the team is going to come in here and say, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and start to execute. So the team is focusing on this screen. Every night there's a job that runs. It takes a snapshot of the project for that sprint, looks for any updates, et cetera, and records the amount of time that's remaining for this little data point, those little blue data points that you see here. All of those blue data points. It tracks the time, the dates that it happens through the whole thing. And so the team goes off, and as they start to work the sprint, they see that there's tasks in there, and obviously they're doing their updates, et cetera, and they're moving things to the right. And then at the end, now they have the to review column, which again is not, and I apologize for this, the visibility of it is not so good, but it's in this area here. And when they come to the sprint review meeting, they're just basically going through those, and they can actually go through the demonstration script and ask, answer questions. And depending on how big this feature list that was to review, I mean, it could take a good day in front of the product owner to review this, and all the interested stakeholders asking questions. That it could take about a day to get that sprint review meeting. So as we're going through, we update those tasks and such. There's some other features about this that might make some sense. So let's say we had an item that was a little too big, this editable card wall, right? So the team wants to break up an editable card wall into some tasks because they feel that it's going to be a little bit too big. A lot of this planning, from the very top level all the way down, people are trying to build small tasks, compartmental tasks that they can deliver as units. So there's the ability, you'll see here, that we have these different kinds of tasks, or cards we call them. So we want to track bug fixes, right? How much time is being injected into our sprint because there's a bug somewhere. In theoretical Scrum, that never happens, right? It's always shippable product. That's theoretical. So we had ceremonies. We have epics. Epics are like this really vague feature request that you don't really know. It's really bigger than a breadbox, and you're going to have to drill it down into smaller user stories. And then user stories actually get broken down even farther into tasks. So you can take a user story and say, okay, to do an editable card wall, we're going to have to, we're going to insert some tasks here. We're going to say, well, first we have to build the form. Sorry about my typing here. We're going to make that a subtask. And underneath the build form, we're going to have to build the middle tier. And then build the database, et cetera, et cetera. These probably aren't true, but you get this. You get the hint, right? And so now you can have one of your team members actually build one of these, and it's going to take, he'll give an estimate of 5 hours, and build middle tier logic, he'll give an estimate of 10 hours, whatever, and build the database. That guy's pretty good, so he's just got it on. Okay, and so now that rolls up to the editable card wall. Okay, so what we have now is the ability to break up user stories and break them down into small tasks, and that was very beneficial. In some cases, these user stories were able to be handled by one developer. I can handle this, no problem, I can do it all. In some cases, it was a little bit big, and we had some developers that needed some work because on the team, everybody was engaged on their cards, and they were running out of cards, so we're going to have to build some tasks in, and so that kind of splits up that card into being able to be executed by multiple people. Another advantage of breaking it up into tasks is what we found is Scrum being built as a team, it relies on everybody being multi-skilled. If everybody has like a single skill, like a typical waterfall, you can call it Scrum, but if the database developer is always doing the database and he has to do it after the guy that does the middle tier, it's still waterfall, right? So it works better if you have some multiple disciplines. If you're a .NET developer, you might dabble in database. If you're a database developer, you might dabble in .NET. And certainly your strength is in your core competency, but you, as a team, you're all responsible to deliver this thing. So, you know, one thing I don't want to hear on my Scrum teams is, oh, that's not my job, or I don't know, you know, that's not what I do. It's you're responsible as a team to deliver this product. And so if you need somebody to write a database script and there's a .NET developer that's core competency but he can do scripts, great, have him do it. Team up or pair up with the database guy that give you some guidance, and it works well as a team, but you're working well as a team, right? How many football teams, any football fans out there, you know, the guy fumbles the ball and, well, it's not my job to pick it up. You know, that just doesn't work. So you're never going to get anywhere with that kind of attitude, right? So it's a team effort, and that with the discourse in my coaching with the team is very along those lines, you know, trying to get them to the top level and getting to the performing mode. I don't know if you know storming, forming, norming, performing, but they ended up at the beginning storming a lot. They were like very feisty developers. After a while, after working together, after probably 3 or 4 months of working together, this team really started to gel, really started to work, and I think we got pretty close to performing. I have to go review the book on exactly the metrics for that, but it was pretty close. But it was always about talking about teamwork, and you know, nobody has a single job. Everybody's responsible to deliver the tool. All right, so let's see what else I got on my agenda for today. About 15 minutes, I got about 5 left. Oh, backlog grooming event. Okay, so like I said, a very important thing to keep the team moving was to take a look at the backlog grooming event. And although this was a good approach for daily updates, the backlog grooming event actually took a lot of analysis for the team, or more analysis. I wouldn't say a lot, but more. So what we had is that same report, but a more detailed report in the sprint burn down. So I'm going to have this Agile team here in the sprint 2, and so there's our burn down, right? This is the part that you didn't see in the burn down, and down here, this is on the report, but not on the web part, is the actual velocity rates of the team. So the baseline effort, what we forecasted as the velocity, what the actual effort was at any point, what the actual velocity was, remaining effort, required velocity. So if the required velocity on this particular report, if the required velocity is greater than the forecast velocity, it'll turn red, and then the items that are actually not being worked on what the forecast, it'll show red. So the team can use this to say, okay, well, I'm not going to worry about the complete stuff, but the stuff that's next, or the stuff that's in QA, or I might have to throw it over the wall, right? So what the team did is use this report when they were red. They knew they were going to finish, so they're going to figure out what was slowing them down, what they needed to throw over the fence, what they could actually execute this time around. In other words, they weren't able to deliver the entire feature, but certainly performing some of the tasks on that feature in this current sprint was ideal for them. Although they wouldn't release a shippable product, they'd get some of the things done, so that way the next sprint, all they'd have to do is put a bow around it, and then they could deliver that feature. So they would use this report, and then they'd come into the project plan. And notice I'm showing a little bit of that right here. So when they throw it into the backlog, they're putting it in the backlog part of the plan, and they're just moving it out of the sprint. The burn down only uses this section of the plan to actually figure out the burn down. So by moving it out, you immediately reduce the amount of work, right? So that's that big drop down, that big downward slope that they threw this over the wall because they couldn't do it. But notice that hopefully they were able to do some of the works on the e-card wall, right? So they were able to do some of the work in this sprint, although they were not able to release it. So they had a few more things that they needed to carry over. They made a comment on it, and they went ahead and carried it over. Now, the team also experimented with one more feature of Project Server. You guys know about that you can link a document to a task? They played with that, and that was actually pretty good. So they were able to, like, in the I column, which I have hidden here, there's a little document, and there's a document that you can click it and open it up and actually see the feature. That worked, it worked pretty well. The only caveat was when there was some major restructuring, and you needed to break it down in different ways. You know, we had to unlink things. So after a while, the team just gave up on that. And what they actually did is they have a column that actually has the feature in it. It's actually right here, and it should have been pasted right in there. So the feature name is a decent. Actually, it's not a decent. It's a pretty pathetic way of finding a feature because you're giving it some title that may or may not make sense to people. But certainly having the notes of the actual feature was really, really good. And being able to find it was a little bit of a challenge. That's why they experimented with the link, and it worked, but it prevented other things. So I think some of the teams that actually picked this tool up are using the linking feature. Some of the teams aren't. I think my point to all of you is that this is a tool that can be configured to handle any kind of project, including Scrum. It does the burn downs. It'll help manage your process. It gives visibility across the organization. You don't necessarily need the TFS plugin. The TFS plugin folds right into this, right? It totally works. You just promote these to the Team Foundation server, and they become executable tasks inside of the Team Foundation server. And then what's nice about the Team Foundation server part, which is not subject to this, is that you can check in code against these features, right? So you can say, okay, I'm checking in my code, and I've worked on these features. I can update the time, right, from my Visual Studio, and it updates this. So then you don't need the editable card wall in that manner. Okay. Time. Let's see what else we're missing here. Burn down. Oh, sprint retrospective. Okay, so one more thing here. So as the team's executing, right, they do their presentation. They got thumbs up. The product owner says, yes, let's move this to production, and we're all good. So then, this was interesting, right? We were very solid on retrospectives. We really took those at heart. It was the team doing a couple things, not only improving their own development processes, their own ways of developing, but it's also developing their Scrum process. So what went well, what didn't go well, and then what solutions can we present to our leadership to say, hey, we'd like this or we'd like that because this didn't go well and this is what the costs were. So we captured all those sprint retrospectives in the actual team site. And then we promoted them to a main library. So everybody, it was almost like a planning poker, if you guys know what planning pokers are. Everybody got to vote. Everybody had their little index cards, and they would put them up at the beginning with the index cards. They were burning a lot of index cards. And then they would categorize them and then put stars by them and say, okay, these are the most important ones. Well, this does the same thing, right? It tells you what went well. Everybody can come in here at any time. We didn't have to wait to the last day to actually do a lesson learned. Any time when something went wrong, you can come in here and type a retrospective. The retrospective ceremony at the end of the sprint was then to review these, to categorize them, discuss them, add some detail, get the team to either agree or disagree, or agree to disagree, and then make their suggestions to management based on their lessons learned. Now, all these lessons learned then got transferred and archived at the end of the project to a master retrospective. So they can be reviewed and looking for trends and things that aren't getting corrected that are continuously causing problems. So the sprint retrospective is handled in this particular solution as well. And so that's Scrum, a sprint. It's a sprint, right? I could stay here forever and talk about it. We just took a sprint around Project Server. Okay. Any questions? Sir?
How did you make the dynamic cardboard?
Card wall? It's a ASPX page, a .NET solution.
So you custom coded some .NET on top of Project Server?
Yep.
Okay.
Do the cards move with the updates?
Yes, when you update them, they'll move to the next one. In fact, one of the developer that had his hand on his head, if you saw that picture, this guy right here, Deepak, this guy in the corner down here, he actually developed a Connect solution. So all you have to do is do this, and it actually moves the car.
Really?
Yeah, he did. He's a nut. But anyway, great developer. I mean, the guy's awesome. And but he developed a Connect solution for the card wall. So you just kind of make a motion like that, and it moves. I don't know how valuable that is, but it was cool. It was a cool little play thing that we did play with it for a while. This room, by the way, the team. Let's talk a little bit more about that. There was a foosball table behind this team. There was 3 teams in this whole room. Down at the end, there was an Xbox in a monitor, and the team spent much of their life. It wasn't a 9-to-5 job for these guys. They're always in here, and so they had a refrigerator full of not beer, Coke, and sodas and stuff, and juices, and it was really good. It was a good atmosphere for this team to go. And again, the key thing for this kind of environment is those quiet areas. You have to have those quiet areas. These developers have to get up and get out of there.